Good evening, and welcome to Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's installment provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep for once. So lie back, adjust your volume, take a nice deep breath, and off we go. This evening, we continue our month of revisiting some of your favorite episodes with selections from the Book of Household Management, comprising information for the mistress, housekeeper, cook, kitchen maid, butler, footman, coachman, valet, upper and under housemaids, lady's maid, maid of all work, laundry maid, nurse and nursemaid, monthly, wet and sick nurses, etc., etc. Also sanitary, medical, and legal memoranda by Mrs. Isabella Beeton, published originally by S.O. Beaton in 24 monthly parts, 1859 to 1861, first published in a bound edition, 1861. Let's pick up with her very detailed advice for domestic servants, with Chapter 2, The Housekeeper. As second in command in the house, except in large establishments where there is a house steward, the housekeeper must consider herself as the immediate representative of her mistress, and bring to the management of the household all those qualities of honesty, industry, and vigilance in the same degree as if she were at the head of her own family, constantly on the watch to detect any wrongdoing on the part of any of the domestics. She will overlook all that goes on in the house, and will see that every department is thoroughly attended to, and that the servants are comfortable, at the same time that their various duties are properly performed. Cleanliness, punctuality, order, and method are essentials in the character of a good housekeeper. Without the first, no household can be said to be well managed. The second is equally all important, for those who are under the housekeeper will take their cue from her, and in the same proportion as punctuality governs her movements, so will it theirs. Order again is indispensable, for by it we wish to be understood that there should be a place for everything, and everything in its place. Method, too, is most necessary, for when the work is properly contrived and each part arranged in regular succession, it will be done more quickly and more effectually. A necessary qualification for a housekeeper is that she should thoroughly understand accounts. She will have to write in her books an accurate registry of all sums paid for any and every purpose, all the current expenses of the house, tradesmen's bills, and other extraneous matter. As we have mentioned under the head of the mistress, a housekeeper's accounts should be periodically balanced and examined by the head of the house. Nothing tends more to the satisfaction of both employer and employed than this arrangement. Short reckonings make long friends stands good in this case as in others. It will be found an excellent plan to take an account of every article which comes into the house connected with housekeeping, and is not paid for at the time. The book containing these entries can then be compared with the bills sent in by the various tradesmen, so that any discrepancy can be inquired into and set right. An intelligent housekeeper will, by this means, be better able to judge of the average consumption of each article by the household, and if that quantity be at any time exceeded, the cause may be discovered and rectified if it proceed from waste or carelessness. Although in the department of the cook, the housekeeper does not generally much interfere, yet it is necessary that she should possess a good knowledge of the culinary art, as in many instances it may be requisite for her to take the superintendence of the kitchen. As a rule, it may be stated that the housekeeper, in those establishments where there is no house steward or man cook, undertakes the preparation of the confectionery, attends to the preserving and pickling of fruits and vegetables, and in a general way to the more difficult branches of the art of cookery. Much of these arrangements will depend, however, on the qualifications of the cook. For instance, if she be an able artiste, there will be but little necessity for the housekeeper to interfere, except in the already noticed articles of confectionery, etc. On the contrary, if the cook be not so clever an adept in her art, then it will be requisite for the housekeeper to give more of her attention to the business of the kitchen than in the former case. It will be one of the duties of the housekeeper to attend to the marketing in the absence of either a house steward or man cook. The daily duties of a housekeeper are regulated in a great measure by the extent of the establishment she superintends. She should, however, rise early and see that all the domestics are duly performing their work, and that everything is progressing satisfactorily for the preparation of the breakfast for the household and family. After breakfast, which in large establishments she will take in the housekeeper's room with the lady's maid, butler, and valet, and where they will be waited on by the still-room maid, she will, on various days set apart for each purpose, carefully examine the household linen, with a view to its being repaired, or to a further quantity being put in hand to be made. She will also see that the furniture throughout the house is well rubbed and polished, and will, besides, attend to all the necessary details of marketing and ordering goods from the tradesmen. The housekeeper's room is generally made use of by the lady's maid, butler, and valet, who take there their breakfast, tea, and supper. The lady's maid will also use this apartment as a sitting room when not engaged with her lady or with some other duties, which would call her elsewhere. In different establishments, according to their size and the rank of the family, different rules of course prevail. For instance, in the mansions of those of very high rank, and where there is a house steward, there are two distinct tables kept, one in the steward's room for the principal members of the household, the other in the servants' hall for the other domestics. At the steward's dinner table, the steward and housekeeper preside, and here also are present the lady's maid, butler, valet, and head gardener. Should any visitors be staying with the family, their servants, generally the valet and lady's maid, will be admitted to the steward's table. After dinner, the housekeeper, having seen that all the members of the establishment have regularly returned to their various duties, and that all the departments of the household are in proper working order, will have many important matters claiming her attention. She will possibly have to give the finishing touch to some article of confectionery, or be occupied with some of the more elaborate processes of the still room. There may also be the dessert to arrange, ice creams to make, and all these employments call for no ordinary degree of care, taste, and attention. The still room was formerly much more in vogue than at present, for in days of auld lang syne, the still was in constant requisition for the supply of sweet-flavored waters for the purposes of cookery, scents and aromatic substances used in the preparation of the toilet, and cordials in cases of accidents and illness. There are some establishments, however, in which distillation is still carried on, and in these the still-room maid has her old duties to perform. In a general way, however, this domestic is immediately concerned with the housekeeper. For the latter, she lights the fire, dusts her room, prepares the breakfast table, and waits at the different meals taken in the housekeeper's room. A still-room maid may learn a very great deal of useful knowledge from her intimate connection with the housekeeper, and if she be active and intelligent, may soon fit herself for a better position in the household. In the evening, the housekeeper will often busy herself with the necessary preparations for the next day's duties. Numberless small but still important arrangements will have to be made, so that everything may move smoothly. At times, perhaps, attention will have to be paid to the breaking of lump sugar, the stoning of raisins, the washing, cleansing, and drying of currants, etc. The evening, too, is the best time for setting right her account of the expenditure, and duly writing a statement of moneys received and paid, and also for making memoranda of any articles she may require for her storeroom or other departments. Periodically, at some convenient time, for instance quarterly or half-yearly, it is a good plan for the housekeeper to make an inventory of everything she has under her care, and compare this with the lists of a former period. She will then be able to furnish a statement, if necessary, of the articles which, on account of time, breakage, loss, or other causes, it has been necessary to replace or replenish. In concluding these remarks on the duties of the housekeeper, we will briefly refer to the very great responsibility which attaches to her position. Like Caesar's wife, she should be above suspicion, and her honesty and sobriety unquestionable, for there are many temptations to which she is exposed. In a physical point of view, the housekeeper should be healthy and strong, and be particularly clean in her person, and her hands, although they may show a degree of roughness from the nature of some of her employments, yet should have a nice, inviting appearance. In her dealings with the various tradesmen, and in her behavior to the domestics under her, the demeanor and conduct of the housekeeper should be such as, in neither case, to diminish by an undue familiarity her authority or influence. Note: it will be useful for the mistress and housekeeper to know the best seasons for various occupations connected with household management, and we accordingly subjoin a few hints which we think will prove valuable. As in the winter months, servants have much more to do in consequence of the necessity there is to attend to the number of fires throughout the household, not much more than the ordinary everyday work can be attempted. In the summer, and when the absence of fires gives the domestics more leisure, then any extra work that is required can be more easily performed. The spring is the usual period set apart for house cleaning and removing all the dust and dirt which will necessarily, with the best of housewives, accumulate during the winter months from the smoke of the coal, oil, gas, etc. This season is also well adapted for washing and bleaching linen, etc., as the weather, not being then too hot for the exertions necessary in washing counterpanes, blankets, and heavy things in general, the work is better and more easily done than in the intense heats of July, which month some recommend for these purposes. Winter curtains should be taken down and replaced by the summer white ones, and furs and woolen cloths also carefully laid by. The former should be well shaken and brushed, and then pinned upon paper or linen, with camphor to preserve them from the moths. furs, etc., will be preserved in the same way. Included under the general description of house cleaning must be understood turning out all the nooks and corners of drawers, cupboards, lumber rooms, lofts, etc., with a view of getting rid of all unnecessary articles which only create dirt and attract vermin. Sweeping of chimneys, taking up carpets, painting and whitewashing the kitchen and offices, papering rooms when needed, and generally speaking, the house putting on with the approaching summer a bright appearance and a new face in unison with nature. Oranges now should be preserved, and orange wine made. The summer will be found, as we have mentioned above, in consequence of the diminution of labor for the domestics, the best period for examining and repairing household linen, and for putting to rights all those articles which have received a large share of wear and tear during the dark winter days. In direct reference to this matter, we may here remark that sheets should be turned sides to middle before they are allowed to get very thin. Otherwise, patching, which is uneconomical from the time it consumes and is unsightly in point of appearance, will have to be resorted to. In June and July, gooseberries, currants, raspberries, strawberries, and other summer fruits should be preserved, and jams and jellies made. In July, too, the making of walnut ketchup should be attended to, as the green walnuts will be approaching perfection for this purpose. Mixed pickles may also be now made, and it will be found a good plan to have ready a jar of pickle juice, into which to put occasionally some young French beans, cauliflowers, etc. In the early autumn, plums of various kinds are to be bottled and preserved, and jams and jellies made. A little later, tomato sauce, a most useful article to have by you, may be prepared. A supply of apples laid in, if you have a place to keep them, as also a few keeping pears and filberts. Endeavor to keep also a large vegetable marrow. It will be found delicious in the winter. In October and November, it will be necessary to prepare for the cold weather and get ready the winter clothing for the various members of the family. The white summer curtains will now be carefully put away, the fireplaces, grates, and chimneys looked to, and the house put in a thorough state of repair, so that no loose tile may, at a future day, interfere with your comfort and extract something considerable from your pocket. In December, the principal household duty lies in preparing for the creature comforts of those near and dear to us, so as to meet old Christmas with a happy face, a contented mind, and a full larder, and in stoning the plums, washing the currants, cutting the citron, beating the eggs, and mixing the pudding, a housewife is not unworthily greeting the genial season of all good things. Chapter 41. Other Domestic Servants. It is the custom of society to abuse its servants, a façon de parler, such as leads their lords and masters to talk of the weather, and when rurally inclined of the crops, leads matronly ladies and ladies just entering on their probation in that honored and honorable state to talk of servants, and, as we are told, wax eloquent over the greatest plague in life while taking a quiet cup of tea. Young men at their clubs also, we are told, like to abuse their fellows, perhaps not without a certain pride and pleasure at the opportunity of intimating that they enjoy such appendages to their state. It is another conviction of society that the race of good servants has died out, at least in England, although they do order these things better in France, that there is neither honesty nor the careful and industrious habits which distinguished the servants of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, that domestics no longer know their place, that the introduction of cheap silks and cottons, and still more recently those ambiguous materials and tweeds, have removed the landmarks between the mistress and her maid, between the master and his man. When the distinction really depends on things so insignificant, this is very probably the case. When the lady of fashion chooses her footman without any other consideration than his height, shape, and tournure of his calf, it is not surprising that she should find a domestic who has no attachment for the family, who considers the figure he cuts behind her carriage, and the late hours he is compelled to keep, a full compensation for the wages he exacts, for the food he wastes, and for the perquisites he can lay his hands on. Nor should the fast young man who chooses his groom for his knowingness in the ways of the turf and in the tricks of low horse dealers be surprised if he is sometimes the victim of these learned ways. But these are the exceptional cases which prove the existence of a better state of things. The great masses of society among us are not thus deserted. There are few families of respectability, from the shopkeeper in the next street to the nobleman whose mansion dignifies the next square, which do not contain among their dependents attached and useful servants. And where these are absent altogether, there are good reasons for it. The sensible master and the kind mistress know that if servants depend on them for their means of living, in their turn they are dependent on their servants for very many of the comforts of life, and that, with a proper amount of care in choosing servants and treating them like reasonable beings, and making slight excuses for the shortcomings of human nature, they will, save in some exceptional case, be tolerably well served, and in most instances surround themselves with attached domestics. This remark, which is applicable to all domestics, is especially so to men servants. Families accustomed to such attendance have always about them humble dependents, whose children have no other prospect than domestic service to look forward to. To them it presents no degradation, but the reverse, to be so employed. They are initiated step by step into the mysteries of the household, with the prospect of rising in the service, if it is a house admitting of promotion, to the respectable position of butler or house steward. In families of humbler pretensions, where they must look for promotion elsewhere, they know that can only be attained by acquiring the goodwill of their employers. Can there be any stronger security for their good conduct, any doubt that, in the mass of domestic servants, good conduct is the rule, the reverse the exception? The number of the male domestics in a family varies according to the wealth and position of the master, from the owner of the ducal mansion with a retinue of attendants, at the head of which is the chamberlain and house steward, to the occupier of the humbler house, where a single footman, or even the odd man-of-all-work, is the only male retainer. The majority of gentlemen's establishments probably comprise a servant out of livery, or butler, a footman and coachman, or coachman and groom, where the horses exceed 2 or 3. Duties of the butler. The domestic duties of the butler are to bring in the eatables at breakfast and wait upon the family at that meal, assisted by the footman, and see to the cleanliness of everything at table. On taking away, he removes the tray with the china and plate, for which he is responsible. At luncheon, he arranges the meal and waits unassisted, the footman now being engaged in other duties. At dinner, he places the silver and plated articles on the table, sees that everything is in its place, and rectifies what is wrong. He carries in the first dish, and announces in the drawing room that dinner is on the table, and respectfully stands by the door until the company are seated, when he takes his place behind his master's chair on the left, to remove the covers, handing them to the other attendants to carry out. After the first course of plates is supplied, his place is at the sideboard to serve the wines, but only when called on. The first course ended, he rings the cook's bell and hands the dishes from the table to the other servants to carry away, receiving from them the second course, which he places on the table, removing the covers as before, and again taking his place at the sideboard. At dessert, the slips being removed, the butler receives the dessert from the other servants and arranges it on the table with plates and glasses, and then takes his place behind his master's chair to hand the wines and ices, while the footman stands behind his mistress for the same purpose, the other attendants leaving the room. Where the old-fashioned practice of having the dessert on the polished table without any cloth is still adhered to, the butler should rub off any marks made by the hot dishes before arranging the dessert. Before dinner, he has satisfied himself that the lamps, candles, or gas burners are in perfect order, if not lighted, which will usually be the case. Having served everyone with their share of the dessert, put the fires in order when these are used, and seen the lights are all right, at a signal from his master, he and the footman leave the room. He now proceeds to the drawing room, arranges the fireplace, and sees to the lights. He then returns to his pantry, prepared to answer the bell and attend to the company, while the footman is clearing away and cleaning the plate and glasses. At tea he again attends. At bedtime he appears with the candles. He locks up the plate, secures doors and windows, and sees that all the fires are safe. In addition to these duties, the butler, where only one footman is kept, will be required to perform some of the duties of the valet, to pay bills and superintend the other servants. But the real duties of the butler are in the wine cellar. There he should be competent to advise his master as to the price and quality of the wine to be laid in, fine, bottle, cork, and seal it, and place it in the bins. Brewing, racking, and bottling malt liquors belong to his office, as well as their distribution. These and other drinkables are brought from the cellar every day by his own hands, except where an under-butler is kept, and a careful entry of every bottle used entered in the cellar book, so that the book should always show the contents of the cellar. The office of butler is thus one of very great trust in a household. Here, as elsewhere, honesty is the best policy. The butler should make it his business to understand the proper treatment of the different wines under his charge, which he can easily do from the wine merchant, and faithfully attend to it. His own reputation will soon compensate for the absence of bribes from unprincipled wine merchants. Nothing spreads more rapidly in society than the reputation of a good wine cellar, and all that is required is wines well chosen and well cared for. And this a little knowledge, carefully applied, will soon supply. The butler, we have said, has charge of the contents of the cellars, and it is his duty to keep them in a proper condition, to find down wine in wood, bottle it off, and store it away in places suited to the sorts. Where wine comes into the cellar ready bottled, it is usual to return the same number of empty bottles. The butler has not, in this case, the same inducements to keep the bottles of the different sorts separated. But where the wine is bottled in the house, he will find his account not only in keeping them separate, but in rinsing them well, and even washing them with clean water as soon as they are empty. There are various modes for fining wine. Isinglass, gelatin, and gum arabic are all used for the purpose. Whichever of these articles is used, the process is always the same. Supposing eggs, the cheapest to be used, draw a gallon or so of the wine and mix 1 quart of it with the whites of 4 eggs by stirring it with a whisk. Afterwards, when thoroughly mixed, pour it back into the cask through the bunghole and stir up the whole cask in a rotatory direction with a clean split stick inserted through the bunghole. Having stirred it sufficiently, pour in the remainder of the wine drawn off until the cask is full. Then stir again, skimming off the bubbles that rise to the surface. When thoroughly mixed by stirring, close the bunghole and leave it to stand for 3 or 4 days. This quantity of clarified wine will fine 13 dozen of port or sherry. The other clearing ingredients are applied in the same manner, the material being cut into small pieces and dissolved in the quart of wine, and the cask stirred in the same manner. To bottle wine. Having thoroughly washed and dried the bottles, supposing they have been used before for the same kind of wine, provide corks, which will be improved by being slightly boiled or at least steeped in hot water, a wooden hammer or mallet, a bottling boot, and a squeezer for the corks. Bore a hole in the lower part of the cask with a gimlet, receiving the liquid stream which follows in the bottle and filterer, which is placed in a tub or basin. This operation is best performed by 2 persons, one to draw the wine, the other to cork the bottles. The drawer is to see that the bottles are up to the mark, but not too full, the bottle being placed in a clean tub to prevent waste. The corking boot is buckled by a strap to the knee, the bottle placed in it, and the cork, after being squeezed in the press, driven in by a flat wooden mallet. As the wine draws near to the bottom of the cask, a thick piece of muslin is placed in the strainer to prevent the viscous grounds from passing into the bottle. Having carefully counted the bottles, they are stored away in their respective bins, a layer of sand or sawdust being placed under the first tier and another over it. A second tier is laid over this, protected by a lath, the head of the second being laid to the bottom of the first. Over this another bed of sawdust is laid, not too thick, another lath, and so on till the bin is filled. Wine so laid in will be ready for use according to its quality and age. port wine old in the wood will be ready to drink in 5 or 6 months, but if it is a fruity wine, it will improve every year. Sherry, if of good quality, will be fit to drink as soon as the sickness, as its first condition after bottling is called, ceases, and will also improve. But the cellar must be kept at a perfectly steady temperature, neither too hot nor too cold, but about 55 degrees or 60 degrees, and absolutely free from draughts of cold air. Duties of the footman. Where a single footman or odd man is the only male servant, then whatever his ostensible position, he is required to make himself generally useful. He has to clean the knives and shoes, the furniture, the plate, answer the visitors who call, the drawing room and parlor bells, and do all the errands. His life is no sinecure, and a methodical arrangement of his time will be necessary in order to perform his many duties with any satisfaction to himself or his master. The footman only finds himself in stockings, shoes, and washing. Where silk stockings or other extra articles of linen are worn, they are found by the family, as well as his livery, a working dress consisting of a pair of overalls, a waistcoat, a fustian jacket, with a white or jean one for times when he is liable to be called to answer the door or wait at breakfast, and on quitting his service, he is expected to leave behind him any livery had within 6 months. The footman is expected to rise early in order to get through all his dirty work before the family are stirring. Boots and shoes and knives and forks should be cleaned, lamps in use trimmed, his master's clothes brushed, the furniture rubbed over, so that he may put aside his working dress, tidy himself, and appear in a clean jean jacket to lay the cloth and prepare breakfast for the family. We need hardly dwell on the boot cleaning process. 3 good brushes and good blacking must be provided. One of the brushes hard to brush off the mud, the other soft to lay on the blacking, the third of a medium hardness for polishing, and each should be kept for its particular use. The blacking should be kept corked up except when in use, and applied to the brush with a sponge tied to a stick, which, when put away, rests in a notch cut in the cork. When boots come in very muddy, it is a good practice to wash off the mud and wipe them dry with a sponge, then leave them to dry very gradually on their sides, taking care they are not placed near the fire or scorched. Much delicacy of treatment is required in cleaning ladies' boots, so as to make the leather look well polished, and the upper part retain a fresh appearance, with the lining free from hand marks, which are very offensive to a lady of refined tastes. Patent leather boots require to be wiped with a wet sponge, and afterwards with a soft dry cloth, and occasionally with a soft cloth and sweet oil, blacking and polishing the edges of the soles in the usual way, but so as not to cover the patent polish with blacking. A little milk may also be used with very good effect for patent leather boots. Top boots are still occasionally worn by gentlemen. While cleaning the lower part in the usual manner, protect the tops by inserting a cloth or brown paper under the edges and bringing it over them. In cleaning the tops, let the covering fall down over the boot. Wash the tops clean with soap and flannel, and rub out any spots with pumice stone. If the tops are to be whiter, dissolve an ounce of oxalic acid and half an ounce of pumice stone in a pint of soft water. If a brown color is intended, mix an ounce of muriatic acid, half an ounce of alum, half an ounce of gum arabic, and half an ounce of spirit of lavender in a pint, and a half of skimmed milk turned. These mixtures apply by means of a sponge and polish when dry with a rubber made of soft flannel. Knives are now generally cleaned by means of Kent's or Master's machine, which gives very little trouble and is very effective. Before, however, putting the knives into the machine, it is highly necessary that they be first washed in a little warm, not hot, water, and then thoroughly wiped. If put into the machine with any grease on them, it adheres to the brushes and consequently renders them unfit for use for the next knives that may be put in. When this precaution is not taken, the machine must come to pieces, so causing an immense amount of trouble, which may all be avoided by having the knives thoroughly free from grease before using the machine. Brushes are also used for cleaning forks, which facilitate the operation. When knives are so cleaned, see that they are carefully polished, wiped, and with a good edge, the ferrules and prongs free from dirt, and place them in the basket with the handles all one way. Lamp trimming requires a thorough acquaintance with the mechanism. After that, constant attention to cleanliness and an occasional entire clearing out with hot water. When this is done, all the parts should be carefully dried before filling again with oil. When lacquered, wipe the lacquered parts with a soft brush and cloth, and wash occasionally with weak soap suds, wiping carefully afterwards. Brass lamps may be cleaned with oil and rotten stone every day when trimmed. With bronze and other ornamental lamps, more care will be required, and soft flannel and oil only used to prevent the removal of the bronze or enamel. Brasswork or any metalwork not lacquered is cleaned by a little oil and rotten stone made into a paste, or with fine emery powder and oil mixed in the same manner. A small portion of sal ammoniac beat into a fine powder and moistened with soft water, rubbed over brass ornaments and heated over a charcoal fire and rubbed dry with bran or whitening, will give to brasswork the brilliancy of gold. In trimming moderator lamps, let the wick be cut evenly all round, as if left higher in one place than it is in another, it will cause it to smoke and burn badly. The lamp should then be filled with oil from a feeder, and afterwards well wiped with a cloth or rag kept for the purpose. If it can be avoided, never wash the chimneys of a lamp, as it causes them to crack when they become hot. Small sticks covered with wash leather pads are the best things to use for cleaning the glasses inside, and a clean duster for polishing the outside. The globe of a moderator lamp should be occasionally washed in warm soap and water, then well rinsed in cold water, and either wiped dry or left to drain. Where candle lamps are used, take out the springs occasionally and free them well from the grease that adheres to them. French polish, so universally applied to furniture, is easily kept in condition by dusting and rubbing with a soft cloth or a rubber of old silk, but dining tables can only be kept in order by hard rubbing, or rather by quick rubbing, which warms the wood and removes all spots. Brushing clothes is a very simple but very necessary operation. Fine cloths require to be brushed lightly and with rather a soft brush, except where mud is to be removed. When a hard one is necessary, being previously beaten lightly to dislodge the dirt, lay the garment on a table and brush it in the direction of the nap. Having brushed it properly, turn the sleeves back to the collar so that the folds may come at the elbow joints. Next, turn the lapels or sides back over the folded sleeves. Then lay the skirts over level with the collar so that the crease may fall about the center and double one half over the other, so as the fold comes in the center of the back. Having got through his dirty work, the single footman has now to clean himself and prepare the breakfast. He lays the cloth on the table, over it the breakfast cloth, and sets the breakfast things in order, and then proceeds to wait upon his master if he has any of the duties of a valet to perform. Where a valet is not kept, a portion of his duties falls to the footman's share, brushing the clothes among others. When the hat is silk, it requires brushing every day with a soft brush. After rain, it requires wiping the way of the nap before drying, and when nearly dry, brushing with the soft brush and with the hat stick in it. If the footman is required to perform any part of the valet's duties, he will have to see that the housemaid lights a fire in the dressing room in due time, that the room is dusted and cleaned, that the wash-hand ewer is filled with soft water, and that the bath, whether hot or cold, is ready when required, that towels are at hand, that hair brushes and combs are properly cleansed and in their places, that hot water is ready at the hour ordered, the dressing gown and slippers in their place, the clean linen aired, and the clothes to be worn for the day in their proper places. After the master has dressed, it will be the footman's duty to restore everything to its place properly cleansed and dry, and the whole restore to order. At breakfast, when there is no butler, the footman carries up the tea urn, and assisted by the housemaid, he waits during breakfast. Breakfast over, he removes the tray and other things off the table, folds up the breakfast cloth, and sets the room in order by sweeping up all crumbs, shaking the cloth, and laying it on the table again, making up the fire, and sweeping up the hearth. At luncheon time, nearly the same routine is observed, except where the footman is either out with the carriage or away on other business, when, in the absence of any butler, the housemaid must assist. For dinner, the footman lays the cloth, taking care that the table is not too near the fire if there is one, and that passage room is left. A tablecloth should be laid without a wrinkle, and this requires 2 persons. Over this the slips are laid, which are usually removed preparatory to placing dessert on the table. He prepares knives, forks, and glasses, with 5 or 6 plates for each person. This done, he places chairs enough for the party, distributing them equally on each side of the table, and opposite to each a napkin neatly folded, within it a piece of bread or small roll, and a knife on the right side of each plate, a fork on the left, and a carving knife and fork at the top and bottom of the table outside the others, with the rests opposite to them, and a gravy spoon beside the knife. The fish slice should be at the top, where the lady of the house, with the assistance of the gentleman next to her, divides the fish, and the soup ladle at the bottom. It is sometimes usual to add a dessert knife and fork. At the same time, on the right side also of each plate, put a wine glass for as many kinds of wine as it is intended to hand round, and a finger glass or glass cooler about 4 inches from the edge. The latter are frequently put on the table with the dessert. About half an hour before dinner, he rings the dinner bell, where that is the practice, and occupies himself with carrying up everything he is likely to require. At the expiration of the time, having communicated with the cook, he rings the real dinner bell and proceeds to take it up with such assistance as he can obtain. Having ascertained that all is in order, that his own dress is clean and presentable, and his white cotton gloves are without a stain, he announces in the drawing room that dinner is served, and stands respectfully by the door until the company are seated. He places himself on the left, behind his master, who is to distribute the soup. Where soup and fish are served together, his place will be at his mistress's left hand. But he must be on the alert to see that whoever is assisting him, whether male or female, are at their posts. If any of the guests has brought his own servant with him, his place is behind his master's chair, rendering such assistance to others as he can while attending to his master's wants throughout the dinner, so that every guest has what he requires. This necessitates both activity and intelligence, and should be done without bustle, without asking any questions, except where it is the custom of the house to hand round dishes or wine, when it will be necessary to mention, in a quiet and unobtrusive manner, the dish or wine you present. Salt cellars should be placed on the table in numbers sufficient for the guests, so that each may help themselves, or at least their immediate neighbors. Dinners à la Russe. In some houses, the table is laid out with plate and glass and ornamented with flowers, the dessert only being placed on the table, the dinner itself being placed on the sideboard and handed round in succession, in courses of soup, fish, entrees, meat, game, and sweets. This is not only elegant but economical, as fewer dishes are required, the symmetry of the table being made up with the ornaments and dessert. The various dishes are also handed round when hot, but it involves additional and superior attendance, as the wines are also handed round, and unless the servants are very active and intelligent, many blunders are likely to be made. General observations. While attentive to all, the footman should be obtrusive to none. He should give nothing but on a waiter, and always hand it with the left hand and on the left side of the person he serves, and hold it so that the guest may take it with ease. In lifting dishes from the table, he should use both hands and remove them with care, so that nothing is spilt on the tablecloth or on the dresses of the guests. Masters as well as servants sometimes make mistakes, but it is not expected that a servant will correct any omissions, even if he should have time to notice them, although with the best intentions. Thus it would not be correct, for instance, if he observed that his master took wine with the ladies all round, as some gentlemen still continue to do, but stopped at someone, to nudge him on the shoulder and say, as was done by the servant of a Scottish gentleman, What ails you at her in the green gown? It will be better to leave the lady unnoticed than for the servant thus to turn his master into ridicule. During dinner, each person's knife, fork, plate, and spoon should be changed as soon as he is done with it. The vegetables and sauces belonging to the different dishes presented without remark to the guests, and the footman should tread lightly in moving round, and if possible should bear in mind if there is a wit or humorist of the party whose good things keep the table in a roar, that they are not expected to reach his ears. In opening wine, let it be done quietly and without shaking the bottle. If crusted, let it be inclined to the crusted side, and decanted well in that position. In opening champagne, it is not necessary to discharge it with a pop. Properly cooled, the cork is easily extracted without an explosion. When the cork is out, the mouth of the bottle should be wiped with the napkin over the footman's arm. At the end of the first course, notice is conveyed to the cook, who is waiting to send up the second, which is introduced in the same way as before. The attendants who remove the fragments, carrying the dishes from the kitchen and handing them to the footman or butler, whose duty it is to arrange them on the table. After dinner, the dessert glasses and wines are placed on the table by the footman, who places himself behind his master's chair to supply wine and hand round the ices and other refreshments, all other servants leaving the room. As soon as the drawing-room bell rings for tea, the footman enters with the tray which has been previously prepared, hands the tray round to the company with cream and sugar, the tea and coffee generally being poured out, while another attendant hands cakes, toast, or biscuits. If it is an ordinary family party where this social meal is prepared by the mistress, he carries the urn or kettle as the case may be, hands round the toast, or other such eatable as may be required, removing the whole in the same manner when tea is over. After each meal, the footman's place is in his pantry. Here perfect order should prevail, a place for everything, and everything in its place. A sink with hot and cold water laid on is very desirable, cold absolutely necessary. Wooden bowls or tubs of sufficient capacity are required, one for hot and another for cold water. Have the bowl 3 parts full of clean hot water. In this, wash all plate and plated articles which are greasy. Wipe them before cleaning with the brush. The footman in small families, where only one man is kept, has many of the duties of the upper servants to perform as well as his own, and more constant occupation. He will also have the arrangement of his time more immediately under his own control, and he will do well to reduce it to a methodical division. All his rough work should be done before breakfast is ready, when he must appear clean and in a presentable state. After breakfast, when everything belonging to his pantry is cleaned and put in its place, the furniture in the dining and drawing rooms requires rubbing. Towards noon, the parlor luncheon is to be prepared, and he must be at his mistress's disposal to go out with the carriage, or follow her if she walks out. When required to go out with the carriage, it is the footman's duty to see that it is come to the door perfectly clean, and that the glasses and sashes and linings are free from dust. In receiving messages at the carriage door, he should turn his ear to the speaker so as to comprehend what is said, in order that he may give his directions to the coachman clearly. When the house he is to call at is reached, he should knock and return to the carriage for orders. In closing the door upon the family, he should see that the handle is securely turned and that no part of the lady's dress is shut in. It is the footman's duty to carry messages or letters for his master or mistress to their friends, to the post, or to the tradespeople, and nothing is more important than dispatch and exactness in doing so, although writing even the simplest message is now the ordinary and very proper practice. Politeness and civility to visitors is one of the things masters and mistresses have a right to expect and should exact rigorously. When visitors present themselves, the servant charged with the duty of opening the door will open it promptly and answer without hesitation if the family are not at home or engaged, which generally means the same thing, and might be oftener used with advantage to morals. On the contrary, if he has no such orders, he will answer affirmatively, open the door wide to admit them, and precede them to open the door of the drawing room. If the family are not there, he will place chairs for them, open the blinds if the room is too dark, and intimate civilly that he goes to inform his mistress. If the lady is in her drawing room, he announces the name of the visitors, having previously acquainted himself with it. In this part of his duty, it is necessary to be very careful to repeat the names correctly. Mispronouncing names is very apt to give offense, and leads sometimes to other disagreeables. When the visitor is departing, the servant should be at hand, ready when rung for to open the door. He should open it with a respectful manner, and close it gently when the visitors are fairly beyond the threshold. When several visitors arrive together, he should take care not to mix up the different names together where they belong to the same family, as Mr., Mrs., and Miss. If they are strangers, he should announce each as distinctly as possible. And with that, we have at last reached the end of the duties of the footman, as detailed by Mrs. Isabella Beeton in her instructional volume, The Book of Household Management. I don't know about you, but that sounds like an employment I would prefer not to have. Hopefully you're no longer awake to hear this, but if you are and you'd like to read this book for yourself, you'll find a link to a free ebook version in the show notes. If you'd like to connect or suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Until our next boring book, good night.